And Julie, we'll turn it to you for your word.
Okay, the most important thing I think we can say about the Bible is it's complicated, very complicated. And as I read more and more, and I think I've read it about 7 times, and I go over it again and find so many different things that I never saw before, I realize it's incredibly complex. Thankfully, we have Swedenborg to thank for helping us understand some of it, but it's still often, wow, what on earth does that mean? First of all, there's a lot of people in this story. There's David. We'll start with David. David is wonderful in this story. I mean, here's a young man who's just but a boy, really. And yet here he is ready to take on Goliath. Notice in this reading, and I don't know whether it's the version I've got of the Bible, but it never calls him Goliath. And in this story, this young man knows that he's going to be protected. Where did he get that from? As far as I can tell from the reading of the whole thing, I don't get any sense that he knew that he was going to be okay, but surely must have had some insights as to why he could go up against Goliath, who would have been massive, by the way. Some people say maybe as tall as 9 feet. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's a lot of men. And he's very evil. Well, we'll stick with David for now. Now we know in the stories of David, he was not always good either, which is a blessing. Here is a man who wrote all those beautiful sayings that we come to know. And if I can get the word, it will come to me eventually. All of the prayers and psalms, that's the word, all the beautiful psalms that he produced. One time I looked through the psalms and thought maybe I can categorize them. The answer is you can't. It might start with something like, by the rivers of Babylon there we sat down, lo, we wept when we remembered Zion. But then towards the end of that, he's feeling better about everything. Or he may start feeling good about things. And then as he goes through, it's maybe not so good. We know he wasn't a great human being, but in this story he had this strong faith that he could go up against Goliath. So what does that mean to us today? Do we ever feel like we're like David? I can do it. I can manage this. Surely David must have prayed ahead of time when facing Goliath. But again, in this story, it doesn't say that necessarily. So this is David, a young man. He also had a bunch of brothers. And I don't remember that part of the story where the brothers are pretty nervous that David's going up against Goliath because they could have lost their little brother. So David could be us when we feel strong, when we know that the divine is looking after us. We're not on our own. And that's often when we pray too. It's when we're feeling bereft. Maybe God forgot us. And often when we believe God has forgotten us, we go, oh, and something changes within us. And it's as though God is saying, no, I've got your back. You're going to be okay. So that was David. And then what other people do we have in here? Well, we have the Philistine, Goliath. He swore at David. He was angry at David. He called for his own gods. And yet he went down with just 1 stone. How did that happen? To me, that's magic. There's no way that David, a young lad, could have hit that man and taken him down. So when do our evil things that happen to us or that we feel angry about, do we feel like it's hopeless? It's like Goliath in our lives, that we can't possibly get over this particular evil we're working with? And the answer is we can. If we remember that David hit Goliath and took him down, with God's help, of course. So that's one part of it. And what about his brothers? That really is a severe situation, seeing their little brother going out there trying to attack Goliath, a massive giant. And again, we can look back in our lives and see, wow, there are times that we really felt that we were no good, that God had forgotten us. And we know that the answer there is to pray for help. There are many different ways we can pray. We can use the prayers that we find in the Bible. There may be other things that you can use that make you feel more comforted about your life. And I, for one, remember many times in my life where I doubted that the divine was really looking after me. Noting that my husband only had about 2 years after he was diagnosed with ALS. That was a hard, hard journey. And watching him get more and more disabled and then finally almost unable to speak was dreadful. It was a terrible feeling of, oh my goodness, now what am I going to do? And I had no idea how I was going to manage. And I'm sure many of you have been in that situation where you wonder, how am I going to manage? My daughter-in-law, who lost her husband 18 months ago, that was my youngest son, had gotten to the stage of almost being completely bereft. She had used up all her money. She had 2 dogs. But the one thing I told my son before he died was, I will look after Janine. And that did not come from me. That came from the divine, because I hadn't even thought about it. So there are many ways we look towards the divine. It could be through other people. It could be just knowing that the divine is there for each and every one of us. And when we feel like the divine has forgotten us, we can use prayer. We can think about times in our lives where we've said, wait, that must have been God working within us. That must be it. What other things do we know? Well, from the writings of Swedenborg, he talks about stones. Now, stones are very varied. There's the stones on the seashore, which have become soft. They perhaps reflect the good aspect of stones, unlike some of the harsher ones where everything is rough and can really hurt. And I think also the breastplates that Aaron wore, those precious stones. Surely that could resemble what happens to stones when they're in water. In rivers, when you think of it, most of the stones there are smooth. So that is the good version of stones, not the harsh ones that can hurt. So as we go through our lives, we can look at different aspects of the Bible. Are there stories that you love and you go back to often? Are there stories that you try to avoid because it seems so harsh? There's many things in the Bible that are extraordinarily harsh. Lots of hateful things happen in the Bible as well. We know that the children of Israel weren't the best people on the planet, but that's the only ones we know about in this part of the Bible. These people were, they were doing the right thing at one point, and then at some point it will get off kilter, and then they do silly things like make models of what they want to worship, like the golden calf. When do we worship the golden calf? Well, if we succumb to worldly things, it could be that money seems really important, or being, what is the word? Or being endowed with some kind of special ability. We are all human beings. We're all easily strayed to evil. And sometimes I will say to myself things like, okay, well, we can recognize that evil's still around, in case we think that we've gotten it right and we realize, wait, what am I saying? What am I doing? What am I thinking? Then we can say, oh, wait, I guess Goliath got in the picture. And there are many other instances in the Bible that you can say the same thing. Oops, I'm with the wrong people right now. So I hope as you go through your journey, whatever that looks like, that you are able to pray towards the divine, to the divine, to get help on this journey. And at times where you feel elated, where things are going beautifully, you can thank the divine for looking after you on your journey of life. May God be with you all. Amen.